We're going to be finishing up talking about the Sermon on the Mount today. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 7 on page 812 if you want to use the Bible right in front of you on the pew rack. Scripture will also be on the screens as well. These last few weeks, looking at the Sermon on the Mount, we've seen Jesus talk about really one overarching theme with little illustrations throughout his message in the Sermon on the Mount, which is the largest single block of teaching we have of Jesus. He talked about in Matthew chapter 5 how everybody sins, how we break God's law, we break the principles behind the law. Everybody does, except obviously Jesus. And so in breaking those laws and breaking those commandments, we all need salvation. We need to be saved. We need a protector to come and take care of us because we have broken his laws. But then things begin to develop in attempting to keep the law, attempting to keep the principles behind the law, attempting to do things that are temporary and only last in this world. Jesus goes on to talk in Matthew chapter 6 about chasing after the things in this world that do not last. Things like people's opinions, things like money or financial security. How those things will only lead to anxiety and worry because they all have expiration dates. And the only way to find peace is by seeking after God and his kingdom. He'll take care of all of our needs because he knows them better than we do. But that's the only way peace can be found. We have to keep our eyes on eternal things. But in keeping our eyes on eternal things, that means keeping our eyes off of temporary things. In the same way of keeping our eyes off of each other in an effort to judge each other, as we saw last week in Matthew chapter 7. Sometimes we try to judge each other, try to hold ourselves or each other to an impossible standard that we ourselves can't keep. We need to remember that we all fall short, that we are all in need of help. And so we all need to ask and seek the Lord in prayer on behalf of each other as well as for ourselves. And all in an effort to go and be who Jesus designed us to be. But when we try to be who Jesus designed to be, we will soon discover it's not the easiest thing in the world to try to accomplish. I don't know if y'all have ever experienced that. Trying to live the Christian life is not very easy, wouldn't you say? Well, let's look at how Jesus talks about that. We're going to look today at how he wraps up the Sermon on the Mount. This is how Jesus concludes his message. Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 13. Jesus said, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. Those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." Enter by the narrow gate. The gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. Those who enter it are many. Destruction is punishment. Destruction is, in this case, the opposite of heaven. It is hell. It's eternal punishment. He says it's easy to go that way because our default is sin. Our default is to walk away from God. That's the easiest thing to do in the world, is to sin. He says, so many find that way because that's how we're built. That's how we're hardwired, because from the moment sin entered into the world, it has infected all of us. And so we go that route naturally. And so Jesus says then, enter by the narrow gate. That gate is narrow. The way is hard that leads to life, eternal life. And those who find it are few. Now that word hard there is interesting. You know, he just said the way is easy that leads to destruction, that leads away from God. And it is. But when he says hard here in this verse, that word literally translates to afflicted or oppressed. That you try to go the way of God, you try to go the way of Jesus, you're going to find affliction or oppression from some kind of outside source. It can be other people. It can be circumstances. It can even be strategic temptation from the enemy, Satan himself. But you will find oppression and affliction if you try to go the way of Jesus. He says that's just the way it is. He actually tells us that again in John chapter 16, verse 33. He says, in this world you will have trouble. It's going to be hard. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be difficult. But then he says, but take heart, because I've overcome the world. I have conquered the difficult. So if you follow after me, is what Jesus is saying there in John 16. If you follow after me, it's not that life's going to be easy, but you will have somebody walking the road with you through all this difficult, through all this affliction and oppression that he talks about here in Matthew 7. You see, in our life, when we're going towards the narrow gate, there's going to be situations, there's going to be people that we encounter that try to appear to offer us help. But in reality, they are severely hindering our way forward. You ever encountered a situation or a person who it looks like they want to help you, but in reality you find out on the back end just made the way of Jesus more difficult? Look at what Jesus says in verse 15. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. False prophets come to you in sheep's clothing, inwardly are ravenous wolves. They appear to be peaceful. They appear to be good, but they are ravenous wolves. They are in reality detrimental to our spiritual health. And they may not, these false prophets, that means they're speaking something that sounds good but is really not. Is really working against what God would have you to do. And the false prophet here may not appear outright evil. It's easy to recognize somebody who's doing outright evil. I mean, if you see somebody out there murdering 15 people, you go, that's evil. But if somebody is kind of subtly saying something that may not be outright evil, it's not all that easy to recognize at times. Because a strategic element that the enemy tries to do is he doesn't try to get you to go from 100% following after God to immediately 100% going away from God. What the enemy tries to do is he tries to chip away at your resolve a little bit at a time. To where if you're going 100% after God, he's not going to get you to go in reverse 100%. He's going to take you from 100% down to like 98%, just a little bit, down to 95%. And he's not going to do it again immediately. It's going to be over days or weeks or months or even years. To where decades down the line, you realize that you're following after God at like a 35% rating where you were at 100, and you don't know how you got there. It's because the enemy just goes a little bit at a time, chipping away a little bit at a time, chipping away your resolve a little bit at a time to get you to give in to what he wants. Because Satan's playing the long game. He's been at this deal a lot longer than we've been alive. And so he's going to keep doing it that way because it works. It works. Anything that prevents a 100% effort of our pursuit of the way of Jesus is from the enemy. Anything that gets in the way of us having 100% effort in pursuit of the way of Jesus is from the enemy. The thing itself may not be bad, but when it's injected into our life and it prevents us from 100% going after Jesus, maybe it's a distraction, maybe it's a person and a relationship, maybe it's certain things on social media, maybe, I don't know if you know about this feature on social media that you can mute somebody for 30 days. Maybe some of you people need to mute people for 30 days because it totally throws off your mind. Every time you're scrolling, you see their name, and you get lost for an hour and a half thinking about how terrible this person is. And you're scrolling through their feed, trying to be extra careful not to accidentally click on the like button, and because it'll show up in their notification. You're just going. Maybe you don't just need to mute somebody. Maybe you just need to straight block them because just seeing it messes you up. It doesn't just mess you up for an hour and a half. It messes you up for days. Anything that prevents 100% effort of our pursuit of Jesus is a strategy of the enemy to keep us from going after him, to knock us down just another few percent from going after Jesus. Maybe it's certain shows you stream. Maybe it's streaming platform altogether. Anything that would prevent 100% effort is the enemy trying to chip away at you. Just trying to chip away a little bit at a time. Maybe it's a news channel and politics. I know we're in a crazy year of elections and whatnots, but if it's preventing 100% effort of your pursuit of Jesus, the enemy's using that to really mess with your head. You need to cut it off. Because the election, I don't know if y'all know this, if you've been around long enough, elections come and go. And every time we have an election, it's the end of the world. The world hasn't ended yet. But Jesus is still on the throne. And so we have to 100%, with everything we have, follow after Jesus and not allow all this other mess to distract us and pull us away from where Jesus would have us be. Anything that prevents 100% effort in the pursuit of the way of Jesus is from the enemy. Anything. And it may not be that for somebody else, but if it is for you, you got to cut it off. It's like a snake, Lynette. She found a snake down in the shed yesterday. So if we got some deacons who want to go on a snake hunt, there's a big old snake down in the shed. She was coming to mow the yard and said, "Whoop, I'm not supposed to mow the yard today." It's like a snake. You got to cut the head off of the snake to end that thing. You got to cut it off completely. God was trying to say, don't mow the yard yesterday. So maybe you got a snake in your shed of your heart. Say, I don't need to be doing that anymore. I just need to cut that off and not go that route. Anything that prevents 100% effort of your pursuit of Jesus is from the enemy. Look at verse 16. You will recognize them by their fruits. Talking about the false prophets trying to pull you away from Jesus. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. Again, speaking about the false prophets. Now I want you to notice something in what Jesus says here. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, but a diseased tree cannot bear good fruit. A diseased tree bears bad fruit. Notice that Jesus does not say a dead tree. He says a diseased tree. A tree that's got something messed up on the inside. A tree that has potential to produce good fruit, but it's got something messed up on the inside that needs to be fixed. We got this apple tree out in our backyard. Several years ago, it was producing this really, I don't know how you, sour? Gross tasting apples. Like not very pleasant to taste. And lots of research and neighbors with all kinds of theories about why that is. I don't know if you've got any gardener neighbors, but everybody knows everything about everything if they've gardened once. And a couple years ago, that tree produced some more apples, and they were fine. But whatever it was making it produce fruit that didn't taste good. And that happens with us spiritually. When we allow things to come up in our root system, which was probably what was happening with that tree, something coming up in our root system, it makes us produce fruit that's not good. Maybe we need to replace the soil that we planted our roots in. We need to stop taking in things, ingesting things that mess up our fruit. And so you would say, okay, produces bad fruit, and the tree is obviously people. So what is bad fruit for a person? Complaining is bad fruit for a person. Whining, bad fruit for a person. Thinking that you know everything and your way is the best way. Trying to control everybody, that's bad fruit. Bad fruit. Worrying about the possibilities of what could be the worst thing that possibly is out there that could happen. Bad fruit. And if you're a disciple of Jesus, if you're a genuine disciple of Jesus, following after Jesus, none of these things should be fruit you produce. Now, honestly, we all produce these fruit from time to time. I know a bunch of you people. I know some of you produce complaining fruit sometimes. I do too. Ask my family. I do. But if we're going to be genuine disciples of Jesus, we got to figure out what is getting in our root system. What are we ingesting that is producing this bad fruit within us? And we got to remove that stuff so that we can then become a healthy tree and produce good fruit. Good fruit is forgiveness. Good fruit is the fruit of the Spirit. love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's called the fruit of the Spirit, meaning if you have the Spirit, these are proofs that the Spirit's in you. If you give off these things, love and joy and peace and patience, kindness and goodness and faithfulness, gentleness and self-control, forgiveness, you giving these things off means you have Jesus' Spirit within you. Those are good fruits that you give. So then we have to begin to examine our lives. Okay, if I'm producing this bad fruit, if I'm complaining and whining and I'm develop bitterness because of unforgiveness, and if I'm worrying constantly and all the time, what am I taking in or what am I not taking in? What nutrient, spiritual nutrient am I missing so that my fruit can then move from the bad fruit to the good fruit, to the love and the peace and the joy and the patience? How can I do that and become that? It's becoming more like Jesus, because a genuine disciple of Jesus produces good fruit, because a genuine disciple of Jesus is chasing after Jesus, pursuing Jesus. Like he said all the way back in chapter 6, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added unto you. Seek first him and his kingdom, and you'll be producing good fruit. But not everybody's going to produce good fruit. Verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who's in heaven. Now notice that. The one who does the will of my Father. So good fruit comes from doing God's will. God's will, first off, is for you to know Jesus and then to follow Jesus. And if you're following Jesus as his genuine disciple, you will be producing good fruit. Again, that doesn't mean you never produce a bad apple. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do complain. Sometimes you do whine. Sometimes you do have trouble forgiving somebody. But if you're working towards following after him, making progress, even though we're not perfect, then you're doing what God would have you do. You're following after his will. A genuine disciple produces good fruit, and good fruit comes from doing God's will. Verse 22. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name, and do mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Now, in context, these people are the false prophets he was just talking about in the previous section. The pretenders, the producers of, the habitual producers of bad fruit. No good fruit in them because they don't have Jesus in them. They didn't follow the Lord. They followed themselves, or they pretended to follow the Lord. Wanted people to think they were following the Lord, but they weren't really. They didn't believe in Jesus. For a disciple of Jesus, it's very evident that they genuinely follow Jesus. It's evident that they're following Jesus. I mean, he gives the fruit example. You're giving off good fruit. I mean, you're following Jesus. But this that he's talking about here, there's going to be some who are pretenders, is a reference back to the very beginning of his Sermon on the Mount. He's tying it all together, something he said at the beginning to the end here. So flip back a page. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. He said, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. Now, I've always had a confusion about that. How can salt lose saltiness? I mean, salt is what they call a stable compound. It's always salty. It's never unsalty. You're not going to get unsalty salt. Unsalty salt is not salt. It was never salt to begin with, and that's the point he's talking about here, because that's what he was talking about at the end of the message too. If there is unsalty salt, it was never salt to start with. Just like at the end of the message where we just read, you got the false prophets pretending to be genuine followers of Jesus. He says they were never believers to begin with. They're going to come and they're going to say, Lord, Lord, we did all this stuff for you, but we didn't really believe in you. He says, yeah, you didn't believe in me. That's it. You were never salt. You were never salt. But Jesus says here, if you're a follower of me, if you're a disciple of me, then you're the salt of the earth. You can't lose your flavor. You're always salty. in the biblical sense, not salty in the way we use it now. Like, man, that person's real salty, don't go near them. But he says, no, you're salty in that you bring flavor to the world. Look at verse 14. Not only are you salt, it says you are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So you're the salt of the earth, you're a city on a hill, you're the light of the world. So salt, it's three things tied together. Salt never loses its flavor. A city on a hill can never be hidden. It's impossible to hide. And a light under a basket isn't a light. Because have you ever taken a candle and put like a jar or a cup on top of it? What happens to the candle? It's not lit anymore. There's no more light there. You're going to not cover it, put it in the middle of the room. So a covered light isn't a light because the light goes out. Salt never loses its flavor. A city on a hill can't be hidden. And a light cannot stay lit under a basket, under a jar, under a container. It has to be exposed to oxygen to stay lit. There's no such thing as unsalted disciples. It's oxymoronic. It can't exist together. There's no such thing as dark light. There's no such thing as wet, dry. You're one or the other. Can't be both. You're one or the other. Jesus is saying that it's impossible to be a genuine disciple of Jesus and not show it in some capacity. It's going to be evident to no one else, to Jesus, because he knows your heart. It's going to be evident in some capacity if you're a genuine disciple of Jesus. Salt and light here, they're essential to life. We can't exist. We need light. We can't grow food if we have no light. We need light to be able to function in this world. And both salt and light deeply impact everything they touch. If you put just a little bit too much salt in the waffle batter, is it going to be pretty salty? All the waffles are going to be, I'm giving a personal example. That's happened in my house. I put in too much salt one time, and the waffles tasted like they came from a seafood restaurant. It was very salty waffles. A little bit of salt goes a long way. In the same way, everything is impacted by light. Just a little bit of light pierces the darkness and changes everything. If y'all have ever been in this room on Christmas Eve, you know we have our candlelight service, and we try to black out the room so that the candles really light up the room. But I don't know if y'all have noticed, we have a giant window. And we try to cover it with a tarp, but even covering it, still a little bit of light leaks through. Because if there's a little bit of light, it's going to change everything. And so there's a little bit of light going to change everything. A city on a hill, change everything. A little bit of salt, change everything. It impacts everything. So that's why Jesus said, you're the salt of the earth. You're a city on a hill. You are the light of the world. But that phrase, light of the world, is interesting. Because I was really meditating on it, thinking about this week. In light of the world, I said, wait a minute. Jesus said, he said, we're the light of the world, but hold up a sec. In John chapter 8, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. So how can Jesus be the light of the world and we be the light of the world at the same time? Are you people Jesus? Well, no, you're not. Just tell you, you're not Jesus. I'm not Jesus. He says, I'm the light of the world, but then here in Matthew chapter 7, or Matthew 5, he says, you are the light of the world. How can both exist? You know, Scripture tells us about a light that guards the day and a light that guards the night. The sun, and what's the one for the night? The moon. Does the moon have any light? No. The moon doesn't produce any light. All the moon can do to light up the night, to brighten the night, is reflect the sun. The moon reflects the sun to brighten the night. In the same way, disciples reflect the sun, S-O-N, to brighten the night. I need 4 volunteers to help me with an illustration. I'm not pouring water on you or anything. I just need you to stand. I need 4 volunteers who can stand up. Can I get you 4 volunteers to come here? I need 4 volunteers to come here who can stand up. All right, here's 1, 2, 2 more. Give me 2 more. 2 more. Come on, 3, Horatio, yeah, and Jason. All right, here we go. Y'all come here. I need one of you to be Jesus. We'll let the superintendent of the year will be Jesus. Come here. Superintendent of the year, Jason Sanders. Here we go. All right. He's got a light. Can I get a witness it's working? I used it the other day because our power went out for a while. And y'all come here. Come here, Chanel. So Jesus, you stand right over here, and you're shining the light on me. I'm a Christian, and y'all are going to be distractions. So Chanel, you stand right here. All right. Robert, you stand right over here. And Horatio, you stand right here. And so here's the thing. Here, y'all look at me. It's my job as a follower of Jesus to reflect Jesus. Y'all know what this is? It's a mirror. There you go. And so if the light is shining on me, I'm supposed to be reflecting that light on the world. All right? But the problem becomes when I allow elements of the world to get between me and Jesus. Here, screw this with a little ratio. The light's no longer shining on here. What I'm doing now, when I've allowed elements of the world to get between me and Jesus, I'm reflecting the world. I'm no longer reflecting the light of the world. I'm reflecting the world. I focus on the world. I'm not positioning myself in the world. I'm still in the world, but not of it. Positioning myself to have the world light on me and so I can reflect it and move around and reflect it back on the world. I am, what ends up happening, moving around and allowing the world to get between me and Jesus, where I'm reflecting the world back on the world. Maybe it's something I'm seeing online, and I'm seeing this thing online, and I'm taking it in and taking it in and taking it in, and it's chipping away percentage by percentage away from Jesus, and I'm becoming more like this thing, even though I as a believer know I shouldn't talk like that, I shouldn't think like that, but by ingesting it and taking it in and allowing it to keep coming up on my For You page, I'm becoming more like it and reflecting that. So there's not as much light getting to me. So I'm not reflecting the light onto the world because I'm not allowing the light to come to me. I'm just reflecting the world. I'm allowing elements of the world to eclipse the light of Jesus, bringing darkness where there should be light. Thank you all. Y'all can go back and sit down. Thanks, Jason. I need to reflect Jesus. Yeah, they did a great job. Reflect Jesus. I can only light the world as much as I reflect Jesus. I can only light the world as much as I reflect Jesus. If I'm reflecting Jesus, everything around me will be impacted. If you live in you've got blackout curtains on all your windows, and then you walk outside in the middle of the day, it's going to directly impact everything you see. The same should be the case for a Christian. Everything that everybody sees around you should be the brightness of the glory of Jesus, because he's shining through you. You're reflecting him out into the world, out everywhere you go. Even, we were at a baseball tournament yesterday watching one of my kids play baseball, Liam, and we were sitting there, me and Katie, and it was in the afternoon. Hope was with us, and it was cloudy. And Katie and I have these little camping chairs. We got this little hood thing, and we're trying to block the sun so we don't get sunburned. Hope says, well, the sun's not out, it's cloudy, I'm not going to get sunburned. And I said, well, the thing that's going to burn you from the sun comes through the clouds. Even when it's cloudy, the sun's going to affect you. Even when it's cloudy in the people's lives around you, if you're shining Jesus, you're going to affect them. You're going to impact them. If you're shining Jesus, that's the only way it's going to happen, is if you're shining Jesus, you're reflecting Jesus. But if you're reflecting the world, then you're not going to have any impact on their lives towards Jesus. You're going to impact them towards something else, because you're feeding them bad fruit, because you're taking in the world. You've allowed the enemy to chip away that percentage of how much you're following Jesus, so that you're not shining all that bright on them. You're just reflecting the world back onto the world. We're supposed to reflect the light of the world instead of reflecting the world. Are you reflecting the light of the world, or are you reflecting the world? What tends to be the thing that you reflect the most back onto the world? Is it what we talked about a minute ago, like the complaining and the whining and the bad attitudes, the unforgiveness? Or is it the fruits of the Spirit, the love and the joy and the peace and the patience back onto the world? Because Jesus is shining off of you onto everything around you. When somebody comes to you and your fuse is short that day, what do you reflect? When a situation comes up that would typically cut you off at the knees, a health scare, a worry because somebody's not answering their phone, or all these thoughts run through your mind of what could actually be happening in the moment. Or are you reflecting Jesus onto the situation, on all those people around you? What are you reflecting? What are you reflecting? What you're reflecting is directly impacted by what you're allowing to shine into you. And so we have to decide what we are going to do. Honestly, it's actually the last thing how Jesus finishes the Sermon on the Mount. So turn there, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. Turn back a page. We have to decide what we are going to do with Jesus. Matthew 7, 24. Jesus said, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who has built his house on the sand. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." So if we decide we're going to follow Jesus, be a genuine disciple of Jesus, it's like building your house on a rock, on the foundation, so when the storm comes, you're not going to be washed away. Even when the clouds come, you're still reflecting the bright light of Jesus. You ever been skiing? Anybody ever been skiing or snowboarding? Even when it's cloudy, it's bright. Because through the clouds, the sun comes and reflects off of the snow. You can still get sunburn from the sun hitting the snow and bouncing back up onto you. That's how bright we should be with Jesus. We're reflecting him so brightly that we're going to spiritually sunburn everybody with the power of the glory of Jesus. Some of you have heard the story from the Old Testament, Moses being up on the mountain for 40 days with Jesus. When he came down off of the mountain, the people said, "Man, Moses, you need to put a veil over your face because you're glowing." He was reflecting the light of the Lord because he spent 40 days and nights uninterrupted in the presence of God. And that's what happens when you spend that much time in the presence of God. It is evident. We need to shine that brightly. We need to impact the darkness of the world that much. See, because here's the deal. God created all you people. He put you in the family you're in for a reason. He put you in the neighborhood you're in for a reason. He put you in the job you're in for a reason. And it wasn't just to make money. It wasn't just to go with the flow. It wasn't just to be there and be ignored. It was to shine a light there. To be a beacon, shining the light in the darkness to everybody's life. Not to be constantly singing the refrain, "Nobody knows the trouble I've seen, nobody knows the sorrow." No, it's to be looking at Jesus and say, okay, he's put me in here to impact all these people. Yeah, these people are sinners, and yeah, these people mess up, and yeah, these people constantly offend me, and yeah, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. Okay, but Jesus put me here not to wallow. Jesus put me here to shine brightly in their lives. So are you going to reflect Jesus, or are you going to reflect everybody else? Are they going to impact you, or are you going to impact them? Shine brightly, reflect Jesus. We have to choose what we are going to do with Jesus. As Joshua said in Joshua 24, "As for me and my house, we will follow the Lord. Choose you this day who you will serve." What you choose to do with Jesus will determine your life's outcome. So we all have to decide what we're going to do with Jesus. Are we just going to meet up with him every once in a while for an hour at church, periodically? Or are we going to be a disciple producing good fruit, impacting everything we touch, reflecting the light of the world back out into the darkness of the world? We have to choose what we are going to do with Jesus today. So the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to be a disciple, a genuine disciple reflecting Jesus? Do you want to stop producing bad fruit and start producing good fruit for Jesus? You have to decide, what am I doing with Jesus? What am I reflecting? If I am a follower of Jesus, am I reflecting Jesus genuinely, or am I reflecting all these other things that I'm allowing to impact me and influence me? Or am I going to reflect Jesus? But maybe today you don't know Jesus. Maybe today you've just known about Jesus, but you've never actually met him, never actually believed in him. And so what you need to do today is believe in Jesus. Maybe he put you here in this room or watching online to believe in Jesus right here, right now. Believe that Jesus is God's Son, that he came to this world and he died so all of your sins would be forgiven. And then he rose from the dead so you can live after you die. Maybe that's why you're here today, is to believe in Jesus. So don't argue with him. Don't put it off. Don't say, maybe next week, let me think about it a little bit more. We don't know what's going to happen between now and then. Decide today whether you're going to follow Jesus or not. Believe in Jesus today. In just a sec, the music team's going to come and they're going to sing a song. And it'll be your opportunity then to decide what you want to do. If you want to follow Jesus for the first time, I'll be standing right here at the front. I'd love to talk to you. You can come during the song. You can come after the song. We dismiss everybody. Everybody's walking out. I'll talk to you then. But decide to follow Jesus today. Or you can even come and up here and pray. Pray for yourself that you would have the strength to reflect Jesus, or have the strength to remove the thing from your life that is influencing you to produce bad fruit. Or you need to come and pray for somebody specifically who's really struggling in this area, in your family, in your circle of friends, and they need some more of Jesus.